wrong place. You know where you're at. I know there's a lot of meetings that have been going on past couple days, and we have been having to direct people. Hopefully you're in the right building. Yesterday we were having to direct people down to City Hall, and that wasn't fun. I felt bad about that. So we have a lot of people here today, so I could actually have a good roll call. Mr. Lindemood.
Present.
Ms. Buck. Present. Mr. Edmondson.
Representing Mr. Young here.
Ms. Walsh.
Present.
Present.
Here.
Ms. Wong. Here. And Ms. Petco. Here. I'm here as well, and we do have a quorum. Frank, would you mind making our public involvement announcement?
Sure. All AMATS meetings are open to the public. We have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant, and then the committee will be given a chance to discuss the matter, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
So first thing up is the approval of the agenda. I hear there may be some changes.
Two changes. You want to have the motion first?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second. Moved by Mr. Linden, seconded by Ms. Walsh.
So, we would like to, if with the committee's approval, to move our first general information item up and hear that first. Our consultants that are here, that have been here this week doing some open houses, have a plane to catch, so it'd be nice if we could get to that first, and then we could go back to the business items. So if we could move item 6A up to the first thing to hear. And then I just wanted to remind folks that we had the Freight Advisory Committee resolution up last month as a business item, and it was tabled. So it's available to you. We do have H. Thompson, at this point now the former chair of the Freight Advisory Committee. He's still on the committee, but he's not the chair anymore. So he's here if we have questions regarding it, so we can bring that up. And then in addition, Mr. Post has offered.
Would it be out of order for me to say at this point that I'm here today to withdraw this resolution and apologize to the committee for wasting your time? We'll take this back and write it in a format that is understandable and that we can make our point. And I apologize for taking your agenda time to do this, but that would be my intention for being here today.
It's not on the agenda. It was on last month's agenda, so I don't think that needs to be removed.
In addition,
Yes.
we also have Mr. Post is willing to provide an informational item on the STIP, the 2018 to 21 STIP. Should be a quick little item. Hey, John. Just a short one. So if we could add a STIP up there to the next items, since we're potentially saving all the time for the freight resolutions. I guess we can do that. He really had it.
Are there any, I guess you made the motion, are you opposed to any changes to the agenda?
Sound riveting.
Second, also agreed. Okay. Are there any opposed to the agenda as amended? All right, hearing none, the agenda is approved with those modifications, and please let the record show that Mr. Rudolph is here for this time. Okay, we do not have any minutes in front of us this month, so now I have to remember that the first item before us is item 6A, the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan Update.
Good afternoon, Jamie Axon, Senior Planner. I'm here with my contractor, Heidi from GoodWorks, and we just wanted to give you a quick overview of our kickoff activities and things that have been going on this week for the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan Update. Say that 6 times fast. So we do have a quick PowerPoint for you, so I'm going to get out of the way, so move. And I might need Bart. No.
Good.
So I'm gonna let Heidi introduce herself and we'll get this started as soon as we get. Yeah. Bart, can you grab the lights, or?
Hi, my name is Heidi Ginnen. I work with a small consulting firm in Portland, Oregon. It's called GridWorks. We do policy and planning for non-drivers, which usually means human services, transportation, and non-emergency medical transportation. We're working with Jamie, and we're working with Agnes Beck, which is the local consulting firm on the update to the Human Services Transportation Plan, which was last updated in 2009. Okay, that's so this is what a coordinated plan is. It's really to identify the transportation needs for these specific groups, people with disabilities, seniors, people with low incomes, provide strategies to meet those needs, and prioritize those strategies for funding and for implementation. This is needed as a federal requirement to have access to 5310 funds, which are the federal formula transit funds for enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. So that's your table of contents from your 2009 plan, and these are the requirements for all coordinated plans. The public participation has to include seniors and people with disabilities, human services, transportation providers, public, private, nonprofit, other community stakeholders. We're also going to be reaching out to folks who serve low-income populations. Community background is, that's more of a existing conditions. What's on the ground now? You know, what does it look like? Who's living where? What are the trends we've seen since the last update? The inventory of resources is going to be something we're working on with transportation providers directly, and that's what's your service look like? What's your program area? What are the hours? What kind of vehicles do you have in your fleet? What kind of mobility devices can they take? What kind of restrictions do you have? What kind of funding do you use? The needs assessment is both a quantitative piece that we do with analysis, looking at GIS, doing GIS analysis with demographic information about those populations we talked about, looking at census information about who has access to vehicles, looking at major employment centers, and then comparing that to the inventory to see where are our gaps in services. And from there, we develop strategies and we work to prioritize those strategies. You can go to the next one. So what we've been working on, Jamie mentioned that this was our kickoff week, so we started meetings on Monday morning. And this is before we showed up for the meetings. We've been reading through the planning efforts that have been done over the last 9 years. And really trying to understand what have we already heard from folks in other planning efforts that we can apply to this one so that people don't have to keep telling us the same things that they've already told other consultants and other staff members. And also that we can understand what happened since 2009. There were 7 goals and 43 objectives in the 2009 plan. So we drilled down to see where have we made progress and where haven't we made progress, and started to talk to folks about why and whether some of these are still relevant, whether we need to take a fresh look at those goals. So in the things that we've heard, go to the next one, there are some key themes that emerged while we were reviewing the other planning efforts. So the first was really just a desire for more transit service in general, and a lot of reflection on the impacts of the service change in October, when routes were converted from more winding routes that kind of went through the neighborhood to more kind of straight shots and higher frequencies that had impact on some of the routes that folks had access to, and how they felt like the transit service was serving them for different kinds of trips and different destinations. For the population that we're focused on in particular, with people with disabilities and older adults, it means some folks needing to roll or walk further to a stop, and maybe that's not something that's available to them anymore, at least a fixed route. The next theme that we have heard loud and clear is in the previous plans that we reviewed and public comment, was that Anchorage is a winter city, and this related to all manner of things, but really it's the sidewalks, the plowing, getting into the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk being a safe place to be, the bus stop being a safe place for the bus to be able to pull out and people to be able to wait, and this, likelihood of injury when the snowy conditions are there being accounted for, it was something that really rose as a priority for folks. The next one is, like most of the country, but even more so in many ways, the population in Anchorage is getting older. So you can see this is just 60 plus. We have some other maps that show the 85 plus, which that population tends to have different mobility challenges than 60 plus. There's been an increase in people over the age of 60, particularly kind of in South Addition and in Fairview. And a lot of the seniors depend on community-based support services. In a survey that was done in Alaska in 2015, 72% of seniors said that they wanted to age in place. They wanted to stay independent in their homes. And you can see the impacts that that's going to have for transportation when you look at those darker orange areas on that right-hand side. And that 85 plus population in particular is growing pretty disproportionately and have a tendency to have a higher risk of physical disability and cognitive disabilities that make it difficult for them to drive alone, and so they're going to need other mobility options. And then the last one is that mobility in Anchorage has focused on cars. The land use patterns right now have catered to the automobile, and that has implications for job access. It has implications for service access, and so that's one of the things we're hearing, especially for low-income workers. And there's a perceived shortage of land for development, but when we look at the sort of underutilized lots, there's plenty of opportunity for development. It's just a matter of what is the priority for moving people to that development. The focus on cars also has an implication for people who are walking or rolling and needing to cross streets that are designed to move cars through. So we heard about safety concerns, particularly in the winter, about crossing large streets. And then this week, so far we had a first meeting with municipal leaders. We talked with human service providers, transportation providers, and we had 2 open houses. And these are the things that were the big themes for this week. So the people mover route and stop changes impacted daily life for folks who have limited travel options. And by that, I mean they could be limited by the time period they need to travel. They could be limited by their incomes and inability to afford to drive their own car, or limited by physical or cognitive disabilities. Planning efforts need to prioritize safety and access for people walking and rolling, especially during the winter. This is a pretty big shift from what we saw in the 2009 plan. The 2009 plan didn't have as strong of a focus on pedestrian infrastructure, and that has been just a groundswell of what we have heard this last week, is a real focus on pedestrians. And then also, the organizations that serve people with disabilities and older adults and people with low incomes recognize the need and opportunities for improved coordination. We went through the 2009 objectives and showed what had been accomplished and not accomplished. And rather than feeling, I think, dispirited, folks were really interested in what had gotten accomplished and why, and how to make sure that this next plan focuses on things that are doable. And there was a lot of excitement, especially I think because there are a lot of new staff people sort of trying to find that place where they can really start to understand what the community wants and make those connections, and getting that coordination kicked off again. And so that was pretty exciting for us to hear. So the last thing is, this is what's coming up. We fly back to Portland tonight, but Active Back will be here continuing to do outreach. We're going to be surveying those transportation providers to get their program information and fleet information, doing some focus groups. We'll be drafting the plan during the summer, and we won't try to ask anybody to do any meetings or show up to anything in the summer. And then in the autumn, we're going to have that public review of the draft plan. And come winter, we're hoping to have that approval process. During that fall public review of the draft plan, we've been talking about having a working session with TAC. And so, and Jamie will give you updates in between now and then so that you can see where we're going. And that's it. Any questions?
I'm coming. I love to make comments. I'm thinking, well, okay, what's this after the port? That's nice, not really everything. And then I realized I live in South Edition and I just turned 60. So for me,
That's what it has to do with the port.
Another question, actually. Is this going to address like the van pool as well?
Vanpool is a participant in the program. So yeah, they were at the table this week.
Excellent. Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for changing your agenda.
I'm hoping we don't have another presentation for the other informational items.
I think that is correct.
Okay. Oh, we're gonna work.
Yeah, have to read that.
This guy's name.
Maybe this one works.
So-
Oh, one of them did.
Okay.
we got
More than everything, so.
nice. So you got that one. I didn't
The old machine that works better than this American thing there.
So, we are now on to item 5A, our first action item, which is the 2018-19 Unified Planning Work Program Major Amendments number 1.
So what this relates to is, we had, in our work program last year, we had about $55,000 for the contract for those people who just left the room. And it did not, the work program, those dollars have to be spent by December 31st. And there were some challenges during purchasing, and so we didn't get that money obligated before the end of the year. But as you can see, we have a contractor on board. So we needed to move monies around in 2018, in this year's budget, to fund that contract, since they've already signed on the dotted line. So we took from all sorts of different tasks, small amounts, to get that $55,000 into the contract to fund this. We should be fine with those other tasks to still do what we need to do. We may have some more movement needed to be made in the fourth quarter of this year, but this is what we need to do in order to fund those people who are under contract. That's what it is.
Any questions from the committee?
Need a motion to,
Not yet, we haven't. We need to open for public comment first. So you said, Craig, that all of the items from where you're transferring money, that you'll still be able to do the work identified in those, you think you'll be able to complete the task?
we should be just fine. Typically, by in the fourth quarter, we start noticing we're a little bit over in task 110, and we still have room in task 231. Just do that balancing act later on, so we make sure we can utilize our funds, so.
And like you said, we have somebody under contract, and this contract actually, we have to update this one for federal requirements.
We are federally required to update the plan. We have a contractor under contract. We just need some money to pay them.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public on this item? Hearing none, the matter does lie with committee.
Recommend that the amendment be submitted to the policy committee for their review and approval.
Moved by Mr. Emerson, seconded by Mr. Post. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, that you're recommending that to the policy for their approval. All right, the next item is actually labeled as 5B on the paperwork, but is the 2015-2018 Transportation Improvement Program Admin Modification number 18. We have a teenager.
We do. So for the most part, these are changes in Table 7. These are, which is outside of our allocation. Has to be in the tip because they're federal surface transportation funds that are spent in the AMATS area, but AMATS doesn't decide the allocation. We take the information from the railroad and the transit agency, and they let us know how they're going to spend their FTA funds. So that's what those are. We have a small change in, says update Table 4 to reflect moving $1.2 million from Diamond Center pedestrian and transit improvements over to Table 5 to put them into quality improvements. That's basically it. And this is an admin mod, so we can approve it here at this level and let the policy committee know about it. Well, this is a level, okay, so this one does need to be approved. Scratch that out.
Okay, so this does have to go to the policy committee.
You would be recommending approval of the policy.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee? Barb's everything open, but she submitted, okay.
I'm checking, yeah.
Okay.
move that we forward Admin Mod 18 to the Policy Committee for review.
By Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Linder. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none. I also recommend that for the policy committee's approval. Moving right along. All right, the next item is item 5C, the bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee letter to the policy committee.
So, Madam Chair, we had this came up last month. One of our bicycle pedestrian advisory committee members who is here again today, Tina Thompson, showed up to present it. We made our mistake and didn't have it ready to go for you, so she was gracious enough to show up again. This is a letter that came before the DPAC, and we're going to send it up to the policy committee. There is a memo that goes with the letter explaining what they're asking you to do. And I guess I'd let Tina have a few words if she'd like before that. I know Joni is here as well, staff, DPAC, so she can share some thoughts if need be.
I'm Tina Thompson. I'm a public member of the Bike Ped Advisory Committee. And this letter came up at discussion in December and was crafted between various members of the committee, signed by Darrell Hess, who is our chairman currently. In our community, many of us and many of the people in the room here have been to different workshops from consultants we've had up from outside to talk about improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure within the community. We have a Vision Zero policy. We're trying to develop safe routes to schools. Some of us commute, if not occasionally, sometimes even frequently, via bike or as walkers, although in this community that's still considered in general kind of crazy because it's still considered really quite dangerous. The consultants that have come up and given presentations about bicycle and pedestrian safety have stressed that it's not simply about, although it does have to do with the volume of walkers and bikers. I'm not sure that we're going to become Copenhagen tomorrow, but as we move in that direction and the number of bicyclists and pedestrians increase, their visibility does increase. But we've heard repeatedly that there are many strategies to improving safety that involve the speed of vehicles and the size of the roadways impact that. I remember a consultant a couple of years ago who talked about the rate of deaths at different speeds. Basically, he said that at 20 miles an hour with a pedestrian or a bicyclist and a vehicle, 90% of the injured will survive, but at 40 miles an hour, 90% will die. So providing road diets, slowing speeds, different methods to accomplish these are stressed, and that's basically what is accomplished in this letter. What we are hoping that the committee here will do is pass on these recommendations from us to the policy committee because it's, I don't know, we're a little bit like the student council or something. We need you all to advance our urging forward so that some of these alternate methods besides simply lighting or reworking roads, but some of the basic things that can be done with restriping and that kind of thing can be accomplished and save lives.
Questions from the committee?
What are we supposed to do with it? It's a letter to the policy committee.
We just,
They don't see it unless we say they can see it, or I don't understand.
Well, it's public information. It has been posted on the website, and this website and available for all the public to see, so I don't know that they would see it, but
Well, it says it's an action item, so I'm just wondering what action is expected.
I guess it's a point, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So the letter outlines kind of the concern of pedestrian fatalities over the last 10 to 15 years, I think. It lists a number of tools that are being used in other places to address some of these issues. And it's basically just recommending that you approve, or you recommend approval to the policy committee to review the letter and start thinking about ways to address some of these issues. It doesn't call for specific action, but it does say there are these tools. It's a great time to think about what we could maybe do to make biking and walking safer. So that's the action.
So yes, I think we can forward to them with any information that we also want to add, comments, or choose. I mean, really, I guess it's up to us. It's an informative letter, so. Ms. Walsh?
Well, I just kind of have a question. I know do we have a non-motorized coordinator? Does those duties get assigned towards the municipality?
Yes, some of her duties, I don't know that all of them, because some of them were additional duties, but Brooke Blessing has taken on that role, yes.
Okay, so I guess my question is, and I know you've been involved in Vision Zero, how does what's being asked for, how much has already happened that you know of, in terms of policy and plans and changes and whatnot?
I would say, as far as policies, I don't know that there have been any formal changes to policies addressing any of these, as far as standards when you're looking at for certain classifications of roadways, what the recommended posted speed limit would be. As far as road diets, looking at narrowing speeds, trying to discourage speeding. Looking at, timing of signals, all those sorts of things, and additional features added for those. Those are considered on every project that we do. We specifically time signals generally, so that you're not, any intent not to, really, depending on how fast somebody speeds, they can get through lights, they can stop, there's gonna be
When the yellow shows
Yeah.
up, you know how much.
Exactly.
Then
I
how
know,
much red
there's,
you could
there's
ignore.
ways of doing bad, but I guess the thing that concerns me most about the letter is always just, we get many requests to just reduce posted speed limits without doing any sort of physical changes to roadways, and study after study after study has shown that that is not a good thing, because it does nothing to change driver behavior. A sign does nothing to change driver behavior. And when you have roadways that have consistently operated at certain speeds for a certain amount of time, when you change speed limits without a significant amount of enforcement and education to the public, there really isn't a change in driver behavior. So that is the primary concern I would have, is that, just the engineering alone, when you're looking at the ease of traffic safety, engineering alone doesn't really facilitate the change. You have to have that engineering and education with it. So I would kind of like to see, I guess, a bigger emphasis on the other E's as well, not just that. That was really kind of my concern when reading through this, is that false level of expectation when it comes to just changing posted speed limits. So
It also tends to ignore most of what we at the city and at the state have been actively working on for the last 10 to 15 years.
That's what I'm thinking.
Most of the things in this memo we're already doing.
I
If
guess-
there's a limited budget per year to go implement them all, it's not like we have an infinite source of funds to just go do
Right.
everything at once. So frankly, the letter would be a lot more useful if it had come in with one or two very specific recommendations that they wanted to see added to the tip. Would have been a much more useful letter than this kind of generic, we want you to do what you've been doing for the last 10 years and keep doing it, and ignored any reference to that in the course of their letter.
Mr. Post.
So,
It was just a question kind of following on the theme here. I'm looking down the list of the bulleted items at the bottom there, and I don't think we do most of them. I think we actually do all of them. If you go ahead and look at it. And so I guess I was kind of, I guess to question for staff then, that was recommending approval. Which of them are we not doing?
Well, I'm not an engineer, I don't know exactly which ones these are or not. I know we're doing adjusting light cycle timing, but I don't know if it's to just discourage speeding. I don't know why.
Well, I know that we shortened the duration of the yellow to discourage folks from going ahead and trying to catch the yellow light. So that would be, and that's one of the most dangerous situations right there, so. Any other ideas as to what we don't do?
I don't know.
Okay.
Not my area.
Sorry.
I guess
But you're recommending approval?
The staff is recommending that the TAC look at this and decide if it makes sense to send it to the policy committee. And that's what the TAC is supposed to do. So,
Okay, so my question is going to be, we have the option to send it back to the bike and pedestrian committee and say, no, hey, we want to be partners with you guys in advancing bicycle and pedestrian safety, but we need to give the policy committee something more specific to work with and recognize what we're already doing. So, because if you just read this on its face, it's like, wow, we haven't been doing anything, and it's like we haven't paid attention at all. And in fact, I know how hard your group's going. So, is that an option we have, is to return it to the committee with our comments and observations and say, this is how we can all get together and advance the cause?
I would say absolutely, that's an option. I would think, you guys could set up a work session. You could do a work session on this and get together and see, just so folks understand what is being done and what other options we can pick and still do. Like I say, this is not my area of expertise, and so the TAC has the expertise among the group here. The folks that's what they do for a living. So it seems like a work session might be a good idea to talk about it and see what you guys are doing in all these different areas.
I want to emphasize, it's not from the standpoint of, well, this letter just doesn't recognize how great we are. No, it's that, we want to advance this cause, the Vision Zero thing, but I think that we can help by giving the policy committee something much more specific to work with. So, and I just also need to comment, I love to comment. My husband always says, I'm not an engineer, but I slept with one last night. Moving on.
Well, and I guess to tag on with that, my bigger concern is when I read through this and it's a lot of the focus of what this administration is trying to move forward, and there definitely has been a focus and a lot of discussion when we've been meeting about Vision Zero and the update to the state highway safety plan, and all of this is to look at ways of updating and changing our policies and our design criteria to make sure that we're moving towards this. And it'd be nice to kind of have the discussion, I guess, of what specific changes we could actually recommend to move forward to move towards some of this. And to not be, the intent is here, of the intent of what we're trying to do, but there really isn't any teeth to it in the sense of saying, these are the policies and these are the places where we could actually change to try to move some of those forward, or make some of those changes. And I will tell you, there is some hard feelings, I guess, in my staff who work very hard every day to work on this, that feel as though, their efforts aren't being recognized, but also sometimes feel as though they're caught between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that we have adopted criteria and policies in place, and they're often being asked to do things that are in direct conflict with that. And it would be nice to actually clear up some of that, clear up language, so that they aren't being asked to do stuff that is in direct conflict with some of our adopted policies and procedures. So it'd be nice, I guess, to dig a little bit deeper into this to see what recommended changes we could actually have. So.
Yeah, the TIP project nomination period just closed. Did BPAC recommend any specific projects to be incorporated into the TIP that would address some of these things?
I think that, I think they did.
I don't, I just saw the nominations today. I did not get a chance to look through them. There were several bike and ped plan implementation projects in there, but I'm not sure who nominated them. But
I think there wasn't a group nomination. There were nominations from individual BPAC members.
Gotcha. Because that would have been a very tangible way to move something forward
Yeah.
through this committee.
I mean, but separately, I mean, these are items that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I know that when, I mean, Scott Thomas from the state, who's in the audience, and myself receive inquiries and requests for speed reductions and actually speed increases, because we get both. You know, we have specific evaluations that we have to go through to consider that on different corridors, looking at, you know, the frequency of driveways, you know, there are a lot of things that we consider when we're looking through that, both when it comes to the physical design and geometry of the road and just the surrounding land use and characteristics as well. So these are things that we continue to do. I guess, and one of my questions would be to the BPAC is, it's really hard to look at the city as a whole sometimes, because you lose the fine details when you're trying to do everything everywhere. If there are specific areas of focus and higher priority corridors perhaps that would want to be evaluated and looked at as it relates to this, it would help focus that energy on those problem areas so we can start there. Because a lot of the time when you ask me to do it citywide, I'm trying to eat an elephant. I need my first bite. So it's like, what should the first bite be?
Okay. Can I just say quickly, those are all really good points, and I think that, so the non-motorized planning effort combined with this complete streets policy that's being reviewed right now, combined with the street typologies plan that we intend on starting, those will all be huge things I think that will help. Maybe when we get those in place, it'll be a good time to take a good look at some of the recommendations that you were talking about. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the public on this item?
I would like to speak as a member of the public.
Okay.
I commute sometimes between Kernighan and Providence Hospital, and when I do in the wintertime, I bicycle on Northern Lights. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place, I had a situation this winter when I was nearly taken out by a bus. But moving on from, I was not. I'm here before you today. I also had the occasion this winter to be carpool with a young friend of mine who drove along that route, and he drove rather fast. And I said, "You're speeding, you know, you're going beyond the speed limit." And he said, "Well, I've driven this route before, and I know that to hit the lights, you have to go 47 miles an hour. And just pay attention, you know, because you'll see here as we go 47 miles an hour, we'll hit all the lights." And I thought, wow, he's demonstrating to me all the things that Fred Young at the Alta, our consultant from Alta in 2016 said, that people don't drive based on the posted speed limits. They drive based on the width of the lanes and the timing of the lights and the distance between the lights. So which basically I think speaks to our letter. And rather than saying to professional people who do this day in and day out that I think you should time the lights like this, and I think you should make the lanes like this, and I think you should do this and this and this, I'm here to say, and I think what our letter is trying to say, is that as representing people of the bicycling and pedestrian community, all of these things that we would like to emphasize the need for all of these things to be addressed for optimum bicycle and pedestrian safety. It's, you know, it's your, I can hear you say you want specifics, and so I could break both of those situations down into specifics. But I think as a representative of the bicycling and pedestrian public, our committee took quite a bit of time on this letter, and we would, even if we do not mean for it to be insulting to anybody who already works on these things and spends their days working on these situations, on these things from all points of view, we would simply like to add urgency to these various things being addressed. At the time that Fred Young of Alta was giving that workshop here in this room, I actually bicycled to it in the evening, and as I bicycled home, Northern Lights was being restriped with the same wide lanes, and I felt that it was a lost opportunity, having come to a workshop where he said, when you're restriping, that would be a good time to do a little road diet and that kind of thing. So we're the student council. We're simply trying to say, for the bicycling and pedestrian community, please add some, please use these consultants' advice and implement some of these things when and if possible.
I actually, Scott Thomas is here to kind of give a quick presentation on some information related to this, if you guys would be interested listening to him. He put together a lot of data over the weekend to kind of come up with just some more background information that speaks to this letter, because I think this letter is a little incomplete on certain things. So in your guys' packet, you have a ton of paperwork that you put together. It's all the stuff at the very end. So Scott, if you would like to speak for a minute or so.
Yeah, if I may, just really, I think it's worth about 15 minutes plus to see where we stand, and it might help you in weighing how you move forward. But also, I'll draw a comparison. When we did safety corridors, they were legislated, and the nice thing about that legislation was that the executive branch and legislative branch didn't tell us how to do it, just asked us to do it. And I think the good part is that we figured it out, and we have 10 years of sustained crash reductions because we keep coming up with ideas. So I think it's wise not to settle on exact specifics, but it would help to give us some target corridors, and I can give you that. And I think if we had future workshops, we would come up with some projects. So my advice, I do have slides to show you, and I could show you how I would move forward as on the expertise side or the traffic engineering side. And for technical committees and policy committees, I would leave it to you to actually choose options that are recommended. So if you have time, I brought you about 15 minutes worth of material on where we
Before
stand.
you go into that, I prefer to have a question to the committee about whether or not we would like to have a work session about this, and I prefer to have that sort of presentation in a work session rather than here. So, yes.
I think we still have a lot of time in our agenda, and we have a lot of people here, and work sessions are notoriously hard to get everybody to, so I'd say 15 minutes.
Okay.
That's my,
That's your opinion. Are there any, are there any objections to listening to this information now? No? All right.
I told you to prepare it, so I can't really say.
I was almost hit by a bus. I don't know what to do.
I need a little help getting this guy.
You gotta pick on those buses.
I've only been thrown under the bus.
Yeah, I know. That's pretty common.
I think it's green, yes. You have your, it's the top one here. This one? And I really wish I could get it to you in, let's say, 10 minutes. I just think it's really a complex problem. while we're waiting on that, there's one page I gave you that if I could only give you one page, is that we've achieved significant changes in crashes, pedestrian and bike crashes in the past through policy changes and adopting standards. So I want to say we've already begun. There's always more to do. And we've done it through, on the page that you have, not the slide, we've done it through, in 1995, state policy is to consider non-motorized travel with every project. And that's reflected in the crash trend over decades. We have programs like you mentioned, complete streets and non-motorized plans and safety plans. And in the end, we've adopted standards that make sure the state has built basic space or shoulders and pathways, and that's led to crash reductions. Before you size up the problem, I've noticed that most of these more serious solutions like road diets, changing speeds of major roadways, or signal progression is going to impact the whole network. You want to build a network. So it is a planning function before it's an engineering function. We need to test the model. We need to test our budget available in AMATS, look for other sources. And it's going to have impacts, so meet the demand of other modes. People, the economy runs on vehicular transportation too, and freight, so we got to keep it all moving. So to give you an overview of, since I said we've been doing this since policy changes in 1995, we've been watching this at the state level, and we're willing to help at AMATS and on the DPAC with data. The most recent data that's come in on the new police crash form shows that we have a serious crash problem, that pedestrian fatalities are 9 times that of bicyclists, and they're also just very significant compared to motorists. So that's the left chart. The right chart, serious injuries, too big a share for both. Okay, next one, thanks, Aaron. In terms of total crashes, it's small wedges, but serious and injury, big wedges. The losses due to severity makes that a bigger share of the problem. Okay. And this is what I just told you, and I'm leaving you a lot of information. I'm not going to read all the pages I left you, but I want you to have enough info to think about this letter. The letter, I think, brings up serious problems that we have to look at. Okay. The reason I said policy matters is here's the pedestrian crashes ever since we've had data, with the serious crashes in the dark colors. 1995 in the middle, the state said we used to not have money for pathways, not have money for shoulders. We just had basic rehabilitation projects. We started paying for those pathways in 95 by directive from the governor on down. And the trend is good, not so good in the later the years we're having right now. We have to stay on top of it, so more work to be done. But I'm just saying policy and planning really matters. Okay. On the bicycle front, before 1995, we weren't heading the right way. So then I drew that little black arrow up there, and that's the policy change, and now we're headed the right way. There was a turn in events. Not going down as well as pedestrian crashes, but we've been trying to come up with ways, and that's why I like having an open slate, is let people come up with ideas and keep trying them. Okay. So I read through the DPAC request, and it's asking, I think, good questions, and it's hard to know where to go unless we get to specifics, like specific routes, but it's asking us to have a comprehensive effort, and I just wanted to let you know I thought we began pretty well in 1995, and we've adopted standards in the 2000s that provide at least space. Maybe not the modern space with signing and striping and other devices, but there's space. Versus roads used to not have shoulders at all. Identify those roads, and we've done that since 2005 with meetings with the city and the police department, and we've launched projects. We keep identifying them, and we know where they are, and I think everyone does, and we'll look at a map of that. Design lower speed roads to help. Once you see the problem, you'll find out that we've put in curb bulb outs. There's been road diet projects on 15th Avenue and Arctic, and I think we're gaining on this as we pick the right corridors, and so we just have to keep doing that. But if you're going to tackle the big corridors where there are crashes, you may find that you want to tackle next to them, because eventually that's going to have impacts on the AMATS network on other modes. Okay. BPAC also asked us to do specific things, so that's why this took more than 10 minutes, is there's a lot of strategies that are good in other cities. Adjust timing where you can. And I would say in the city, they're the experts on timing signals. I've seen very good results through Midtown, but they would know what changes to that timing would cause on a daily level. But you can also consult that out and model your future events. What would that do to a whole corridor? It will affect the model if you make big changes in principal arterials. Using road diets, I'd say it's begun. We listed some there. Build greenways, I see that AMATS has already got projects like 10th Avenue and others, and so that's, I think, begun. Reduce speeds. We have been working on Northeast Anchorage speed review for more than a year, and we're still gathering the data. It's like Stephanie said, it takes more than signs. We have policies and national criteria we have to follow, and laws, and there are minimums set for the technical people. Build more crosswalks, build more bike lanes. Some crosswalks have gone in. The city's done some in Providence area. Bike lanes, many have gone in with Elmore and Raspberry Dowling. Build shared roads, that's been a city-led effort, and I think more in progress. Okay. So I just wanted to let you know that I read the letter and there's a lot of things to talk about there. One point that we see in the statewide data and focusing on Anchorage was that looking at the deaths alone, you might say there's a pattern on high-speed roads, but the truth is, they're not all on the high-speed road. They're 100 feet away on the lower speed road, or they're a right turning vehicle. They're lower speed maneuvers. So I found about 50% higher speed, and another half that were on roads that were 30 mile an hour, 35 mile an hour. Strange. When it comes to just studying the fatalities, there's too many external factors to design for this. We have to go look at all the other injuries too. Because a huge amount of these are hit and run drivers. The motorist is probably speeding, not following the speed limit. We have to get to them like described enforcement, and I doubt they're going to care what we get out there for design based on the way they've left some of these crashes. Even the non-motorized user, there's a large amount of them that are impaired or crossing against the signal or crossing nearby when they could use a signal. So because 90% of those are pedestrian fatalities, we have a very difficult problem that's harder than engineering. So I would say money spent on education and enforcement can go a long ways, but we have more to build. So if only people would follow the rules of the road, this Moose was dutifully doing that. And next, what we got? And I only have a few. I wanted to give you some examples of what we've been trying to do. There's a handout called Set Number 2, and it would help this committee to see that there's very specific projects that have already been built. And I won't go over all those, but a lot of things have been going on, as you were saying. Tudor Road, Muldoon Road, the Bar Road used to be a place to walk on pavement in the middle of vehicles, and we have been building quite a bit of raised islands. Pedestrians are going to do what they do. Many that were interviewed said, it's not safe for the other guy, but I'm okay with it. And they stand out there, so we give them refuge. And we reduce the vehicle turning movements to select locations, and that helps. Okay. Intersections, I'd say the city led the way with, besides the medians we have for refuge, they did refuge islands that the DOT built. The city designed for Tudor and Lake Otis. And it shrunk the box, shrunk the crosswalks. And we put countdown timers throughout the whole city for pedestrian signals, curb bulbs throughout downtown. We have actually moved the signal on Tudor, moved it on Muldoon, and that actually creates openings instead of more signals, which is an option. Spacing them well also creates platoons. I just watched a guy on my way here with a cane across Tudor because there was a platoon, there was a big opening. Downtown Anchorage, people cross all the time because there's openings. So platoons are easier to design on one-way roads than two-way roads. Okay. Another thing that has caught the state's attention since we own all the main roads of concern is that that fatality map you saw, most of those pedestrian crashes if there's one thing in common with them is they happen in the late hours or early hours when visibility in the fall months is poor. There's a bicyclist in that red circle commuting in the road, and I have a hard time seeing them. So I run a dash cam in my car all the time. And so these are normal AASHTO traditional light level designs that we design for roadways. We know that the highest crash areas for total pedestrian and bike crashes are Tudor, Muldoon, Midtown, Northern Lights Benson, and Minnesota, and everyone, and Northern Lights Boulevard is a real concern. Gamble and downtown, where it's 30 miles an hour speed limits. So we want to tackle those for these nighttime crashes, and that's the next one here. And I'll only have a few more for you. The top picture is normal light levels using high pressure sodium. The bottom bar is what we have in design, which is to take the savings from LED lighting and boost it for non-motorized traffic to double the light levels. And we're also, I forgot to mention, we're borrowing from the Tudor and Lake Otis design that the city initiated years ago. And we have in design Tudor and C Street, Diamond and C Street, where you have to cross 8 lanes, shrinking the box, but still serving turning traffic. So that's in design, lighting's in design for these hot spots. We want more projects through AMATS. Okay. This is the city project on 9th Avenue, which same dash cam comes out a lot better. There's a pedestrian on the median, but it's because there's vehicle scale lighting and pedestrian scale lighting. And so we can do better for nighttime. That's what we want to do. Okay. Signals were mentioned, and the city's really the experts on running signals. They do speed and signals are related, but just setting the speed signs isn't going to work. Getting adjustments to signals for leading pedestrian indications or putting in mid-block signals or changing the progression is going to affect how the system runs. And so tap into the city's knowledge, hire consultants to look at corridors. If it's really going to be a big change, my recommendation to AMATS is test the model and see if it's worth it and worth funding. Okay. So I only have a couple more, and these are the speed limits posted around Andrews, and there's a legend there. And the yellow is the high pedestrian crash area, the blue is the high bicycle crash area. And as I showed with the fatal chart, it's really a lot of behaviors for the fatalities, but these are total crashes in these areas, and there were, we say, projects. That's why we have lighting, medians, and refuge. And when you look at the fatalities map, there's about a 50-50 split on where they happen. They're as much in neighborhoods as they are out on arterials. They appear to be on arterials, but it's a right turning vehicle. That's a lower speed maneuver. So you have to get into the crashes to really solve it. Okay. And to leave you something to think about in that, and I heard some good points from Alta and Dorney this week, and I see it in NACTO, is that not every street can be the same. We built all our main arterials to this template. It's 5 lanes before they had medians. They were originally going to have medians. 100 foot of right of way. So you can break that down, and you can say we've got 67% of that right of way for vehicles. We've got about, with the pathways that we've added to sidewalks, we've got about 20% of that right of way for non-motorized use. We have to fit utilities. And from a crash standpoint, we're at least 13%, but if you get into serious crashes, non-motorized is as high as 30-some% for fatalities. Well, how much of that space do you assign at AMATS in your planning? If you want to take something away from somewhere, you have to adjust your model. If you want to provide more facilities like a cycle track, which is recommended at high speed, high volume like this, do we have to go after private right-of-way, private property? Very difficult, and that's why I say in the beginning, this is a planning function. Or you can go to the next door right-of-way, the parallel corridor, and maybe, like on the next slide, you can tap into the space of it. This is the same 5-lane road, and it will cost you tens of millions of dollars to convert it to 3. The road diet will impact model output, the network, and the economy of the city. You have to rebuild the drainage. this looks really nice, but that money might go a lot farther in the parallel corridor without buying right away. So, and I see a lot of that happening, and Alta recommended that as one of their Seattle outcomes on Tuesday. So there's good ideas, it's just where do you put them and where do you put your money on the AMATS budget for it. And so I only have 2 more minutes. So if I was to make recommendations, it was keep submitting your ideas through the TAC, submitting your ideas into the MPP, have work sessions with experts at the city and the state. I would be willing to come to EPAC, try to keep an open slate for ideas instead of having to lock in. And then things like road diets, signal density changes, like more signals, which I think are possible in Midtown because we see it in downtown. The city and the state have been talking about more signals on road lights and that's to control that. All of these are going to have an impact on the AMATS model, the AMATS budget, and probably cause other AMATS projects. So that's what comes to mind. And then parallel corridors based on those templates really have value. Peds and bikes don't have the same kinds of crashes. So putting their numbers together can sometimes lead you to trying to put their solutions together. But we learned from the Injury Prevention Center that they really have different solutions and different causes. And as Stephanie said, the 4 E's, we have many examples of getting a lot more for our expense by having a unified effort along with police and education. And so we just need a program, as was suggested in the letter, manage things selectively and as a whole. Signs don't work, and then we do have some transit stops that aren't near signals that look like they're more risk, but we have worked with People Mover, and like on Muldoon and DeBar, they moved the transit stop so that people go through the signal. And so working together, we can probably do even more just on the transit side too. Okay. So I told you this, and I gave you this in the beginning, but test the model, test the budget with each significant idea. Some ideas are easy to adapt to just a project. And there's a bunch more pages there because I was going to let people digest it if the letter was to be recrafted or if AMATS was to not have a work session. There's a second set of data you have, which is all the projects in the last decade that are fairly significant. And the third set of data just shows you that it's a nighttime problem in the fall. It also shows you how we compare to other cities. As dire as it seems for fatalities, Anchorage outperforms or is better than many similar sized hub cities. There's a 2016 Alliance report for biking and walking. They have a lot of data in there. From that data, we're not so bad. We've been making progress. And from that data, we're right up there with Portland. Portland actually is just one step above us in crash rank. So I think Portland has more roads, has some great new examples, but they have a lot of system that I saw that was disjointed and not so good. So we can learn from what they've done recently, but we're doing as well as most major cities, I'd say, because we have such a network. So that's what I wanted to give you was info we can chew on together, we can do work sessions or other committees. It's a tough letter because you want to start going. Okay, so that's what I want. Do we have a good question? No more screen.
Yeah, I was gonna move back up before we can ask questions.
Okay, so my question is actually, is it Ms. Thompson?
Thompson, yes.
Thompson. So is BPAC also doing like similar requests to, say, APD for enforcement of both the driver and bicycle behavior?
BPAC is an advisory committee for AMATS, and our route of expression is through you all to the policy committee. We could act out of our role and,
I guess are you aware of any group that's working with APD regarding enforcement? Not, again, I say driver and bicycle behavior. My example was going to the gym, this is a few years ago, 5 in the morning, eastbound on Benson, right there by Key Bank, right before you enter the intersection. A Street's going this way, my light turns green, I start to go, and a bicycle is wrong way, just missed.
Those
Just-
people give us
I
a
mean,
bad.
he just stopped in time. And the worst part was my husband's car, so that didn't really been a problem. But seriously, it's like, and again, and my husband's a DOT operator, and he just got off 6 months, or, night shift. And he tells me about these people, all in black, during the night, driving, riding along, and the DOT operators, I mean, they have stories and stories they talk about, all the time. And that's bicycle behavior. And I'd say the drivers aren't bad actors, because there's plenty of that too. So I'm just wondering, it just seems like that conversation I never hear about, but APD and the bicycle community, I know it must be happening at some level, but enforcement.
We have the we reach out to APD. My department is who manages the traffic calming, and traffic calming is specifically neighborhood, and try to bring that up to people. We don't do traffic calming on arterial roadways, nor do we do it in business districts, but in neighborhoods. And when we have locations where we've actually done the speed study and we have identified speed issues, we share that information with APD to let them know that there are areas where they can target enforcement, that there are ongoing issues in those areas. I don't regularly hear back, I will say that, to know whether or not that's actually occurring.
I've never seen an officer writing a ticket to a bicycle, ever.
I'm not sure I've seen him writing a ticket to a motorist lately.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have one of our safety director at the port bikes from Foxhall subdivision, so that's, East Northern Lights, to the port every morning. He used to be earlier in the morning, but he goes, bikes home. And, he's lights, vest, backlight on his bike, all the stuff, and thank goodness. But, I know there's a population that will never reach that way in terms of, being a safer bicyclist, but.
Yeah, and like you said, it's, as Scott said, it's all of them together. It's the enforcement, it's the education, it's the engineering. They all have to happen together to make it cohesive, so it's got to device all the different ones. And I think, obviously, since I'm involved in the engineering, it's like I'm bombarded with it, and I often get very disheartened because I don't see as much of the enforcement and education occurring, and a lot of it, unfortunately, ends up coming down to funding. Were there any other questions specifically for Scott Thomas from any of the committee on his presentation, Mr. West?
Actually, it's something that Ms. Thompson brought up, and it's ironic. It really is true. And I wanted to. It's been an area that I've been curious about for a while, even though I work for DOT. But Northern Lights and many other similar roads are posted at 35 miles an hour. If you want to hit the lights, you really need to do much faster. And I've never asked before, so I apologize for hitting you, Cole.
I think if you're asking me what would cause it to change, I'm not sure. The downtown is, I think, successful with enough signals to be timed in progression that it's in control of the signals. And even though it's a high-ranking pedestrian crash area, there's a lot of pedestrians, so that's also why it's high. And they cross very well. Maybe they shouldn't mid-block, but the gaps are very good. Can we do that on Northern Lights and Benson? Yes. There was over time with planning, there was a West Northern Lights pedestrian study because the city and the state didn't want to give up on Northern Lights. And what we realized was it was too tough to solve the problem on Northern Lights alone. There had to be a network, build a network, which may connect us to 27th Avenue, which means we needed north-south pieces in order to have signals. We're not saying we're opposed to more signals on Northern Lights Benson. They just have to have a purpose or no one will use them. We have to guide people to them and make them attractive. So we've actually reserved space for signals west of Minnesota that might go to West Romig instead of sending more traffic to Spenard, as it has happened. And then we've talked about signals between Spenard and Minnesota, but we need a network that's designed before it gets to engineering. So, yeah, I think we can do more.
As far as the timing of the system goes, though, there are bands of green time, of which, depending on where you are in that band of green time, I know when I hit the band, I can drive exactly 35 miles an hour down Northern Lights. Once you get to green at Seward Highway, I will hit every green until Minnesota if I do 35 miles an hour, if you're in the right point of that band. Now, if you're at the tail end of that band, it may be that you have to go 42 miles an hour to try to hit all those green lights. And what you are doing is breaking the law to save yourself a minute and a half of time. Because if you hit a red light, you will wait a minute and a half until you get another green. And so, yes, you are speeding by 7 miles an hour to hit the tail end of that band. So it all depends, I guess, on the timing, and there are breakpoints, and there's certain places where there's a lot that goes into signal timing as far as where you have room to queue, where you have like breakpoints. I don't know that my signal timers have ever specifically gone through and done an analysis on how to time the system to discourage speeding, in the sense that you will effectively just be choosing where you're going to have breakpoints to have queuing, and so you have to do it at specific locations so that you have the spacing to be able to do so. And you're going to specifically stop traffic. We get as many complaints about that. We get accused of doing that, of timing signals to actually make people stop, and then they say that the way they respond to that is by speeding when they get the green light again to make up the lost time that they have. So there is a fine art to it. I'm not saying that we're perfect and that things like that can't be reevaluated and looked at, but there really is we cannot legally time a signal system for a speed that is higher than what the posted speed limit is. We would be violating federal law and our guidelines of what we do when we time our signal system.
So the individuals that are trying to go ahead and catch the tail end are the ones that are speeding, and if they would just resign themselves to going ahead and acknowledging that there's just one light that they would miss, then they would catch the subsequent lights at 35 miles an hour.
It's human nature, though. I mean, everybody wants to save themselves times, unfortunately. And if I could figure out the psychological reason why people think that losing a minute and a half time is going to mean the end of their life, I would be able to solve all the traffic safety problems in the world, I think. It's a very difficult thing. So I saw that there was a hand that went up in the audience for a public comment. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yeah, so I'm Dana Mendoza. I'm actually a staff member. I'm very new, so I'm going to speak on behalf as a staff member and as president. So I just moved here 2 months ago for my position from Arizona. I was hired from out of state. I'm the new air quality project manager in Health and Human Services for the municipality. So I'm in charge of the municipal bike map, bike to work day, and I'm trying to work really close with AMATS and Vision Zero and figure out everything that's going on. So please forgive me if I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to speak up because I've been at a lot of meetings. So I just have a sense that maybe I would like to advise your reconsideration of passing on the letter in conjunction with the state's data to Vision Zero, or to recommend to the policy committee that this get to Vision Zero, only because I actually went to them hoping, I'm an outreach person, so I'm hoping to help with an active transportation campaign from the top down throughout the municipality. And I know Vision Zero is currently in the gathering data phase, gonna do the education, and then going to make policy recommendations. So I feel like the timing is right, and rather than be delayed with work sessions or whatnot, just maybe these people could have a voice within that because they are going to make recommendations. And let me make sure I don't miss any of that. I just think that might be a really efficient way of working together and making sure some more stakeholders are at the table. And I just feel like because we're doing this and that because it's timely, that it might be worth your reconsideration. And then just as a resident, I'm just finding it a little confusing, all these initiatives, and I'm going to be teaching people safe cycling, and I'm just a little concerned. So I see all sides, but I feel like we have a great opportunity to bring people to the table. That money's already spent for Vision Zero. It's what we're doing, and I believe the policy committee has a stake in that and is invested in that. and that in conjunction with Leak AK and some other interdepartmental and interagency communication that's going on, that it just might be worth, I'm not saying those recommendations specifically, but I appreciate what you said, Ms. Thompson, in regards to maybe not this specifically, but then how can we just reevaluate what would make the most sense and have a say in what these Vision Zero policies are as Anchorage residents. So thank you, and maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but it just seemed like being there, it might be worth, because I know that people are trying to regroup on all of these different transportation communication issues internally, and I thought this might be a way of showing the advisory committee that the public is indeed also invested in these and give BPAC a voice I think they should have, so thank you.
Thank you. And you said your name was Dana. What was your last name?
Dana Mendoza.
Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And you're right, there is a lot and a lot of different initiatives going on right now. Part of my fear is there's so much going on that people don't know where to participate to get their voice heard.
Exactly, and I'm trying to work on trying to make that a little more open to the public, but I thought just maybe engaging in some of these conversations together could be helpful without a specific action point in mind.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
Andrew Owens with Kittleson Associates. We're leading the Vision Zero process, and we are aware of all these materials and collaborating with the DOT and other outreach efforts.
Okay, good to know.
All right. Any other public comments? Hearing none, the matter is with the committee.
Recommend that the committee forwards the letter to the policy committee for their consideration.
Second the motion. Friendly amendment. Forward the letter with the information presented from DOT today. Because, and if I can tell you why, I feel like the letter is very well intended, but too vague to really, policy committee they can approve it, I say thanks, we appreciate the letter, but what do they do?
That's
other
the
than,
whole
you
point
know?
of this letter, is to share with the policy committee they have a concern. So let's forward it in and let the policy committee know that there's a concern. No harm, no foul.
Okay, and then this
The
other
rest of this
information?
data, this other data has been shared with the policy committee in the past.
I'll withdraw. Friendly amendment.
So it was moved by Mr. Amundson, seconded by Ms. Buck.
Yes.
Seconded. All right. Are there any opposed? None. All right, then. We are so moved. Thank you for the discussion.
We've shared this with the policy committee report, so it's advisement.
Same.
So the item that was 5C, but I relayed on 5D, we're not. I had, yeah, we're not. We don't have to think about that one. We've already completed 6A, so we're on to 6B, the Glen Highway Integrated Corridor Management Study. And they have a presentation as well? Okay. Let's work through You can steal your seat then.
I'm just going to another public hearing. It's a very complex little You don't have.
Okay, I'm here to present to you just kind of the start of this study. It's an AMATS.
Don't forget to introduce yourself in the record.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Jeannie Bowie with Kinney Engineering. Yeah, and Danielle Bischoff is here with me as well. Okay, AMATS funded study. Edith McKee at DOT is the project manager, and then Kinney Engineering is the consultant on the project. You can go ahead. And basically what the study is focusing on is non-recurring congestion on the Glen Highway. So when there's a crash, when there's weather, when there's some kind of
reason for extra traffic, like maybe the state fair or construction that reduces capacity on the Glen Highway, those kinds of things. We're not looking at recurring congestion that happens every day, but more at non-recurring congestion. And the idea is to increase the reliability and predictability of travel on the corridor. So it's an city, so we're only looking at the Glen Highway within AMATS. So we're going from Airport Heights Drive to the Connect River Bridge, 16 interchanges. Yeah, it's part of the way it's a 6-lane divided highway, and part of the way it's a 4-lane divided highway. So where we are right now is in the data gathering stage. We have an online survey that's gathering data from the public on how they drive the Glen Highway, how they make decisions on when and where to drive, how they get information about traffic conditions, and how they can use that information. We also have an agency survey out, and many of you represent agencies that we've sent the survey to, and we've gotten a lot back. I'll show you kind of what we're doing with that. And we're from the agencies, we're kind of, and stakeholders, we're looking at how do you manage the Glen Highway? What changes do you make depending on these incidents, and how do you coordinate with other agencies? And how do you disseminate information? How do you get information? And then we're doing data collection. We've collected data from the weather stations that are along the Glen Highway. We have crashes on the Glen Highway. We're getting traffic volumes from the continuous count stations on the Glen Highway. And just trying to gather as much information as we can so that we can start to evaluate it and see what's the cost of this survey. So here's our online public survey. It has this welcome screen, and then there's 4 screens that ask for data. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out. This is, as of Monday, we had 1,405 participants. Today it's 1,461, so we've gotten a lot of feedback from the public, and hopefully we're going to community councils this month, and that kind of, when that started, we got another uptick in responses, so hopefully we'll be able to get more by the end of this month. When asked the primary reason for using the Glen Highway, we're showing the survey respondents are mostly using it to get to and from work, but we have a good range of other reasons for using the Glen Highway. One of the things the survey is asking for is for people to put points on a map to say the problems that they're having or the things that they're experiencing. And this is, in general, right now, it's the responses are focused around the interchanges, but they're kind of from all over, and we'll be able to take, so they put the point on the map and they can make a comment. And so there's going to be a lot of information that we'll have from this map. Another thing we're asking is how flexible is your travel time? We're asking in the morning and in the evening for differences. So that blue, the darker blue, is I can only drive at a specific time. I have to be there at this time, and that's a little bigger in the morning than in the evening. And then going all the way kind of around the circle to the green is I can completely change my trip. It doesn't really matter when I travel, and that's a little bigger in the evening than in the morning. So that'll be, I think, also really good information for helping us understand the impact of these non-recurring events. We're asking what method they're using for travel. So we have 67% of our So this is actually a check all that applies, so it's not necessarily one answer per person, but 67% of the check marks are I drive just me and my vehicle on the Glen Highway. 26% is the 2 or more riders in a vehicle. We had some specific things that people could check and then said, tell us what other methods you're using. And a lot of people have added motorcycle, and they usually put, especially in the summer, let's see, also commercial truck was added, so we are getting some commercial drivers responding. And then we asked, how are you getting information about traffic conditions? And the ones I have bolded are the ones that we kind of knew about and had identified for people to check, and then the rest of them are what people have suggested as the methods that they use. And they're also giving us in those comments a little bit of idea of how reliable they think those methods are. So they'll we asked them to tell us what radio station, and there's some other things in the comments, and they're giving us, you know, this radio station, but it's always late, or, you know, they're giving us some information like that. So that'll be helpful for us. Okay, so that's the online public survey. Then we have this completely separate agency survey. These are the stakeholders that we've reached out to, and the dark check marks we have surveys back from already. The lighter check marks, we know people are working on it. We also, JBEAR is not on this list. They have a survey that's maybe a little more specific to them, and they have to go through a process of writing answers and then getting them vetted and then bringing, so we're working with them. And the railroad is not on this list. This survey is maybe not the best for the railroad, but we are planning to work with the railroad on getting information that would contribute to this. Okay.
That's a good question. So did you include the Trackers Association?
Yes.
Okay.
We did. It's not on there, though.
Okay.
It's not on there, but
we
yes.
have sent it to them as well. Good question. Okay, and then in terms of data collection, I told you we're looking at traffic volume, crashes, road weather. We're going to be able to get events that have been posted to 511, a history of that. And then from the stakeholder surveys, we're getting back some information on things that people have data for that they'd be willing to give us. So the school district said they could tell us their bus delay in response to events, and the Cheekak Volunteer Fire Department has given us information on their events that they've responded to. Also, the 2040 Land Use Prep Plan has been offered to us, and if there's anything that anybody knows here about information that would give us any kind of what's happening on the Glen Highway in terms of delay or speed or events, let me know. I've been trying to gather as much as I can. Okay. So we gather all of this data, we write kind of existing conditions, what's going on, and part of that will be how do people coordinate with each other now, like the different agencies, how do they coordinate with each other, and how do they give information to the public. Then we will do an exercise of vision, goals, objectives, criteria, scenarios, where we kind of figure out how would we like it to work. If a crash happens, who gets told, how do they get told, who acts, and how do they act. And from that, we'll come up with okay, here's ways that we could change things. And that could be a wide variety of mitigations. So I just have some examples here. How do we communicate what's happened with social media, or do we put in more dynamic signs? How do the agencies coordinate with each other? How could we improve response times or incident clearing times? Are there infrastructure improvements that would help us? Frontage roads is the one that's been said the most often, I think, up to now, but also, I guess, dynamic signs is kind of an infrastructure as well. And then could we add railroad, could we add lane management? Are there demand management kinds of things that we could do to help? So a very broad range of possible mitigations is planned. And we're trying to do all of that kind of so that it's all together by the end of the summer. An open house by late May that would present the draft study. This is the website of the study. You can link to the public online survey there. So if you are driving the Glen Highway, please go there and take the survey. If your friends or family drive the Glen Highway, you can point them there and get that as well. So that's what I have.
done it twice. Well, I shouldn't say I've done it twice. I did it the agency one you sent me, but while I was in Mexico, I saw the Facebook post of the Glen Highway you study, and I did it about when I'm on the Glen Highway. I'm one of the people who's not doing it for work, but I do drive the Glen Highway for visiting friends, shopping, doing other things out, you know, and so I filled it out from my perspective. So there were some really good questions, and I liked the fact that the map, that you could put points and make comments and say directions for an engineer that's nerdy. I'm like, hey, eastbound at this location. I didn't like being able to provide the information, but I thought it was great that you could pinpoint. It was one of the better travel surveys doing information that I've done. So, awesome. Thumbs up on that. That was good.
I do have a question for Mr. Amundsen. Why aren't there any HOV lines on the Glen Highway?
Sorry?
Be careful, look at that.
Because we currently have 2 lanes for over half of its length. If you're going to have any sort of an effective HOV system, you need 3 lanes, just to start the discussion.
Are there any questions or comments for them from the public? Thank you, Jeannie. Are there any other presentations?
Not that I know of.
Just, okay. So the next item is always our regular, the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. We have an update today.
We are working on setting a work session up for the draft alternatives. So the poll went out. I think most people took it, but if you haven't, make sure you do that. And then we're going to schedule that in the next little bit. So April, whenever Sharon is in Italy is when we'll schedule for it. Second or third.
It needs to be up. Yeah.
Whatever.
So that's your spur votes to fill out the field poll so we can schedule that. And that's the difference of the alternatives.
Yeah, alternatives.
Presentation. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Not that, I want to make sure to
No,
forget Dave's.
I have them on,
Okay.
I have them on my list. I just wanted to make sure
I'm going to
that,
pass this down.
yeah, no, so,
Do that.
yes, so the last informational item we have on here is this. Hey, Nancy's.
We do. Sorry, I could have done PowerPoint, but I'm okay. So I guess the most significant thing is we have a new draft 2018 to 2021 step out for review. The comments are due March 16th. That would be next week. Basically, the STIP is allocating, roughly the 530 grants that we receive from SHWA on an annual basis. If you look at the pie chart on page 2, for those of you that already have this, you'll note that the vast majority of funding that we get, actually a little bit over $300 million since the National Highway Freight Network freight program also goes to the NHS, but about 3/5 of the program goes to the National Highway System. And as we allocate it according to the golden rule, which is he who has the gold makes the rules. So if you look at this one sheet here, where we talk about the FAST Act, and which is kind of a continuation of some of the guidance that are now going on. They established targets for safety, infrastructure condition, congestion, system reliability, and trade. We did actually, for the first time when we were working on the national highway system balancing as a part of this STIP, actually develop criteria that we apply that was consistent with those performance measures and targets. So, for example, we looked at accident data in relation to safety. We looked at pavement data in relation to infrastructure conditioning, bridge data as well for infrastructure conditioning. And we looked at traffic volumes per lane as kind of a metric for congestion, reliability. It was an attempt. It was a first attempt trying to go ahead and apply a data-driven process to this. So, what you see here on the large sheet is what pertains within the SIP relevant to Anchorage. And these are largely, as I mentioned before, in accordance with the direction of federal funding, national highway system projects. And so I don't need to go through all of these. I will go ahead and suggest that you look at the bottom of the unmarked page 2, which says AMATS Ctp Program Allocation. And you'll notice that that number has gone up substantially. If you look at the tip, that was handed out earlier. That number for the combined CMAC and AMATS allocation was roughly 25 million. Now the combined number is over 30 million, and it's increasing. We went ahead and wanted to build in the notion that as the federal highway funds increase, we will be increasing the AMATS allocation. And if you wanted to talk to somebody about that, one of your contacts actually would be me. So you could talk to me. If you want to talk to somebody a little bit closer to the process, you could contact Marie Heidemann, who is helping to run much of the balancing process to the national highway system, a larger pot of money there.
Are there any questions or comments from the public? You have until next week to make comments. Like we said, I underlined it March 16th, so it's just another opportunity letting you know. So, are there any committee comments?
Well, this is a follow-up to last time, and it was a reference today that nominations were closed for the project, and last time I had asked if the nominations were open. Why is it that, the waterborne freight or port projects are not eligible to be included in this? Because if you read most of the data, they always say freight. Well, we're moving the freight from the port. And the answer was, well, because it's not accessible by the public. And so I asked Craig if he would tell me where it says that, because I haven't been able to find it. And so you were going to get me that. So you don't have to do it here, but if you would, please get that to me. I'd like to know where it says we can't play. Okay? Thanks. Because that's a catch-22. We have to be secured by the Coast Guard, by Homeland Security things and requirements, but yet we move the freight. So, and that's part of AMATS. And I know Shaughnessy was here for you last time, Brian, and she was also curious as to why, what the restrictions were and why projects like ours and yours couldn't be
Well,
included.
the same could be said though for airports. I mean, anything on the land side that's open to the public can actually go after highway funds if they so choose, but anything that's on the secure side of the airport couldn't go off
I'm
after.
asking where it says that.
Yeah.
Where does it say that? If it says that, fine. I just like to know it says it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess actually having that documentation. Yeah. I actually had a comment earlier and now I forgot what it was. Actually, I think one of my comments was going to be related to the Glen Highway Integrated Corridor Management Study and the poll. If you haven't actually gone online and done the survey, I highly recommend you do so if you use the Glen Highway. For me, I do not commute. I live in Anchorage, but I do use the highway regularly. And my mom drives it more often than I do, so, and I always care about the safety of it. But it's good to have on the ground people who are using it on a daily basis. Your observations help us design better systems all the time because we cannot be everywhere at all times to know what's going on. So it's great, the more information we can get, feedback. I just say go online, dot.alaska.gov/Glen study and fill it out because it does not take that long. Granted, I was lying next to a pool, next to a beach in Cabo, and I can't say that I probably didn't have a little bit of tequila in my system while I was doing it, but it wasn't that much. So, but it didn't take me that long to do it, and I actually thought it was pretty cool. And it was actually, I
I was doing it on an iPad, so I mean, I was doing it, it's mobile friendly, so it's not just having to do it from a computer. So I highly recommend doing that if you want to provide your feedback on the Glen Highway. And I was going to ask you, how do you define non-reoccurring? Because when it's happening pretty regularly in the wintertime, it's actually kind of, what happened on Saturday? Does anybody know?
Most of the ones that ended up in the ditch were exceeding the speed limit.
And that was my thought too, because my mom was coming back in and she called me and said, Stephanie, what is going on? And I'm like, I don't know, I just know that I got the nixle that the highway's closed. I'm like, and she's like, conditions were no worse than normal. I'm like, I'm going to guess the reason they ended up off the side of the highway is they were following too closely, something abruptly happened, and your option is either to hit the person in front of you or go off the side of the highway. And most people choose to go off the side of the highway, as I would too. So.
Talking with the APD officers that responded, that was their comment for most of them involved excessive speed or following too close.
Okay. All right, that's what I thought. I just wanted, because it was Saturday afternoon, and I know there's probably a lot of people kind of trying to come in for the Iditarod and everything else that was going on here in town, but it was kind of surprising to see. I guess that I had pictures from tons of friends and people that were showing me things, and I'm like, holy cow, what's going on? Yeah, so. All right, are there any other committee comments? Go to the order. Are there any public comments from anybody here in the audience? All right. Thank you much for staying with us. It is 4:12 p.m. and we are adjourned.